Hi, my name is Leesa Bellesi, and 3 years ago, my husband and I had an idea of handing out $100 to 100 people in our church. And what happened became far more than anything we could have ever dreamed or imagined. And it was called that day the Kingdom Assignment.
To one he gave 5 talents of money, and to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey.
Denny and I were in youth work for many, many years before we actually started Coast Hills. And I remember one night we were driving along and we were thinking of maybe a creative way to implement the parable of the talents.
One of the things I think that pastors are always trying to do is get to the so what when it comes to the scriptures. And in teaching on this subject of stewardship and going through this parable of the talents, I got to a place where I kind of say, how can we make this parable? How can I allow this parable to come alive in the lives of our people?
Had an idea of something that we had seen done in youth groups where they had given $1 and $5 bills to students, and just the idea of being able to hand out money, but not really at the time thinking about how that would work and not having any money in just a brand new church. But the idea was to get people to kind of understand what that parable was about. And when the church had been going for 15 years and we had $10,000, it just seemed like perfect timing. The movie Pay It Forward came out, and it seemed like, yes, this is time to do this assignment.
And it was then that this old idea that Lisa and I have talked about for years and years, and never really had the opportunity or the courage in some ways to do it. We felt like this was the right time for us to implement that. And so on that Sunday, first on that Saturday and then Sunday, we asked people to come forward.
They were shocked, surprised, amazed that they were actually being handed cold cash in a church.
And I said, if you choose to accept this assignment, and I at that time said this kingdom assignment, I want you to know you do so on the basis of 3 things. Number 1, you recognize this money doesn't belong to you, but it really belongs to the Master, to the Lord, who's entrusted it to you. And number 2, he's entrusted it to you to advance his kingdom.
And so after the initial shock, they walked away, some of them laughing, crying, shaking, and they had $100 in which they needed to be responsible for and take responsibility of.
The third thing we asked them was that in 90 days we want you to come back and tell us what happened to this, much like the parable.
Just watching it and seeing it from our perspective and hearing the stories that began immediately. The next morning we had stories that were already starting to trickle in of how people were really hearing God's voice in a way that they hadn't before and were responding very quickly and praying in ways that they hadn't before.
But we never expected that the media would pick up on that newspapers around the country would begin to publish that, and the stories around it, and that People magazine would be around, the Oprah show, and different kinds of things, that it just mushroomed this little experiment into something that has now begun to impact churches that we hear from on a regular basis around the world.
We hear the stories daily of where people are getting excited just like our people did, and it didn't take that much for people to say, hey, this is different. This is something that I can really wrap my arms around. And we've seen lifelong foundations started with just a $100 bill.
What we'd like to do is simply challenge you in your Bible study or your business or in your congregation or your youth group or your church or your denomination to think about how you could implement a kingdom assignment of this kind in your circle of influence, and to see what God does.
It changed their lives, changed our lives, and it's changed thousands of people's lives.